Hello, hello, BGU students. Kenneth Ortiz here. This is actually the second time I'm recording this video because the first time I had my microphone on mute. I recorded a 13-minute video that was completely silent. So this time I've got the microphone on, and let's dive in. So in this video, I want to give you clear instruction on how to complete one of the watching and reading reflections that I typically assign in my classes. Important note or important caveat to mention is make sure you read the syllabus for your class. So in this video, I'm going to give you a generic overview, what I typically expect in the weekly reflections. But just know that for your class, there may be specific things. There may be something unique or some caveat or nuance to your class that may be different other classes. That won't be a regular thing I do. For most of my classes, the weekly reflections are pretty much the same across the board. However, just make sure you read the syllabus for your class, that you thoroughly have read that, you understand it, you know what's expected of you. And if you have any questions, please ask me, because I don't want anyone watching this video and then maybe they didn't realize there was something unique about your class. So make sure you've done that. Okay, so the weekly reflections that I typically assign from class to class, as I mentioned, are relatively the same. What I do, as if you're one of my students, you probably already know this, I post every week in the content management system, or the learning management system we're using. I post exactly what you're supposed to consume. So, in most cases at Bethany Global University, we're going to be using Populi. In some cases, we may be using Canvas. We may be using some other learning management system. But regardless of whatever the learning management system is, what I typically will be doing for every class is outlining precisely what pieces of content I want you to consume. Typically, there will be maybe a chapter or two from a textbook. Or quite frequently, there will be a YouTube video of some sort, some lecture or sermon. Occasionally, there will be podcast episodes I want you to listen to, and I'll link those in there. Occasionally, there will be PDFs or various documents I want you to look at, or blog posts or articles you find online. So what I want you to do is look in the learning management system. Again, that's whether it's Canvas or Populi or whatever we're using for the particular class that you're in with me. I want you to look through that, and you're going to consume all of the content. You're going to read those chapters or watch those videos. Or make sure you consume that content. And then you're going to write a reflection about that. Make sure that you include all of the content. Everything that's in there, you are expected to reflect upon. There may be moments or occasions where I specifically tell you don't include a particular piece of content, but that will be rare. So unless I specifically tell you otherwise, you should assume that all content must be included in your weekly reflection. It's really important to consider. Okay, so in the learning management system, I'm going to post what you ought to watch, read, consume, and then you're going to summarize that in your weekly reflection. Okay, you're going to tell me what you watched. Okay, and then you're going to summarize that. All right. So, for example, you may say, I read a chapter from, I read chapter 3 from XYZ textbook. I watched the video from so-and-so pastor. I read the PDF article about blank, 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 whatever it is, right? That should take you a sentence, right? And then you're going to summarize that, right? So let's say you read an article of 1,000 words. Well, you're going to try to summarize that in 50 or 75 or 80 words, right? You're going to try to take that entire article and summarize it. You're going to say, I read this article. Here's what the article was about. Here was the main thesis that the person was making. Here are the bullet points. Here are the main ideas, whatever, right? Here are the arguments they made. Here's the counter arguments they were interacting with, whatever it may be, right? For every person, it's going to look a little bit, for every piece of content, it's going to look a little bit different. But the bottom line is you are summarizing what you've consumed. And then the third section, right? The first section is just tell me what you consumed. The second section is going to be, summarize it. You can mesh those sections together if you want that. If that's kind of meshed together, that's fine. But the latter section is then your critical evaluation of what you've consumed. And this is basically your opinion. You're going to evaluate the substance of the content you've consumed and the style of the content. Are you going to write this article? I really liked when he said this thing, and here's the reason why he said, I agreed when the author said this. I disagreed with the author, and here's why I disagree. It's very, very important. It is really helpful if you can point out specific things that you agree and disagree with, and specifically, precisely why you agree and disagree. Also, for those of you who have been in my classes previously, you may be familiar with Mortimer Adler's rubric for agreement and disagreement. His famous section on what the reader can say. If you're familiar with that content, if you've read that material, then it would be highly useful. It'd be very helpful for you to utilize that rubric in your evaluations, right? I disagree with this person because they are uninformed. Here's how they are uninformed, whatever, right? You're going to use his rubric in one way or another. That'll be extremely helpful to you. You also want to point out things that stuck out to you and why. This stuck out to me, and the reason why it stuck out to me is because of this. This thing resonated with this thing offended me, and here's why it offended me. You also want to evaluate this style. I really like what the author is saying, but I think he could have been clearer. I think he's not as clear as you want to be here. Or when he said this thing, I think it's easy for people to misunderstand his point in this particular thing, right? You want to find specific things that the author of that content, whether it's the textbook or a video or whatever, you want to find specific things that they did or did not do that you want to highlight and why you think it's important. Things that stuck out to you. Also, maybe something that really intrigued you, you want to learn more about. Man, I read this thing in the textbook. I never really thought about that. I think I want to learn more about that particular subject. And here's why I want to learn more about the subject, right? The goal of the critical evaluation section is you are giving your opinion of what stuck out to you, what you thought about it, what resonated with you, and why those things stuck out to you or resonated with you. That's the point. Okay, I'm going to give you a few other bits of information about the weekly reflections that could be helpful to you. And then I'm going to give you a metaphor at the very end of this video that I think will be extremely helpful to you as you think about crafting weekly reflections. Number one, these reflections ought to be informal. So there's no MLA or APA citation needed. There's no footnotes needed, no endnotes, there's no bibliography needed, right? There's no title page, nothing. I don't need any of that. This is informal. You're welcome to use first person, all right? For those of you who've been in my previous classes may know, I do not allow first person writing in the research papers, all right, or in book reviews. However, for weekly reflections, first person is perfectly appropriate. It's okay for you to say, I really like this, and here's the, excuse me, I had some Diet Coke a minute ago here, so I apologize. It's perfectly appropriate for you to say, here's the reason why I like this or didn't like this, right? It's okay to be first person. Think about this more of a kind of like a diary or a journal, right? It's a personal reflection upon the content. So it's perfectly appropriate for it to be informal. No citations, none of that needed, no formatting of any kind. Okay, the last thing I will say about the reflections is to think about the reflections the way you would think about telling your friends about something you've experienced, right? So when I'm telling people about the weekly reflections, all of you have done this, all right? Imagine you check out a new restaurant, right? So my wife and I, not too long ago, we discovered this new restaurant out in Roseville called Baltimore that we thought was fantastic, okay? So let's say I went to Baltimore and I loved it, and then I come into the office and I'm talking to one of my colleagues and I say, man, last night, my wife and I, we went to this restaurant called Baltimore in Roseville. It's amazing. I had a filet mignon and Brussels sprouts, and it was incredible. And my wife had this grilled chicken Caesar salad, and grilled a side of grilled mushrooms, whatever. I'm making something up. And then we had this dessert. What I've done here is I've told you what I did, and then I summarized the experience, right? Here's the restaurant. Here's where it's at. Here's what I ate. Here's what my wife ate. Okay. That's basically the first section of your reflection with your content. You tell me what you consumed, and then you're summarizing it, right? That's all you're doing. You're summarizing what actually happened. You're basically a reporter, okay, in this case. And from student to student, this section of the weekly reflections really ought to be the same, right? Or 95% overlap. You know, there really should not be drastic difference between this student and this student because you guys have consumed the same content. And there should be no bias or subjectivity. You're just a reporter giving me the facts of what that particular piece of content was, right? I watched a sermon from Vodi Bakum. He talked about 1 Corinthians 15. He talked about the resurrection. He talked about blank, 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 blank. Okay, that's it. So that's the thing. Now, the second part is the critical evaluation. Let's go back to my metaphor with the restaurant. So let's say I go to my friend and say, man, Baltimore, this restaurant, we did this, we did this, we did this. And now I'm going to give my opinion. Man, this restaurant was fantastic. Man, the reason why I thought it was fantastic is because the service was great. The wait time wasn't super long. The menu's got a lot of great options. They have a lot of different steak options, a lot of different vegetable options. Man, they got a lot of really great appetizers that you can kind of mix and match. And, you know, that really is unique because my wife really likes to mix and match her appetizers and things of that nature. Like, I'm talking about it at a personal level. We really love the ambiance. My wife and I really liked that the booth had really high walls behind us because she and I are both kind of loud, particularly me. I'm a very loud person. So we like to have loud conversations, and we like knowing that we can have conversations without disturbing the people behind us. So we really like that, right? I'm giving a critical evaluation. I'm giving my opinion of the restaurant and my experience and what stuck out to me and what I liked and what I did not like, okay? And then I may say, listen, you know, the restaurant's really great. It is a little pricey. It's moderately priced. You know, so it's a little more expensive than I typically want to spend going out. But you know what? Occasionally for date night, it's worth it. You know, for me and my wife to go out and have a great time. Right? I'm giving you a critical evaluation of the restaurant, right? Like that's the idea. That's basically what your weekly reflection ought to be, right? You've done this before with a TV show, right? Let's say you're on Netflix and you watch the 3rd season of Stranger Things and you love it, okay? Now you walk into class the next day before class starts and you're talking to one of your classmates and you're like, man, have you ever seen Stranger Things? You're like, no. You're like, watch. I watched Stranger Things last night. I watched all of you know, season 3. The show is about this like government agency, and there's this girl named Elle with superpowers, and it takes place in the 80s and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just telling you all about what happened. And here's the reason why I love Stranger Things is because, you know, it takes place in the 80s and it kind of gives you this like nostalgic feel, and there's really good acting, and there's these motifs and themes about good and evil, and there's these moments in the series that makes you think about like what is good and what is evil, and the nuance, like good and evil is not always black and white, and there's really good acting, and I really like the actress who plays Elle, and blah 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 blah. Right? I'm critically evaluating the television show. That's basically what I want you to do in your weekly reflections, right? All of you have done this with a movie or a TV show you've watched, or a restaurant you've been to, or some experience you had, or maybe a professor that you loved or didn't love, right? Like we all have these moments where we then tell people about it. And that's basically what I want you to do in the weekly reflection. You're going to consume the material, okay? You're going to watch the videos, read the textbooks, whatever it may be. You're going to consume the material. You're going to summarize it, tell me about it, explain it to me, and then you're going to critically evaluate it. You're going to give your opinion of the content, the substance of that content, and the style of that content. You're going to talk about what stuck out to you and why it stuck out to you. First, you're going to summarize. You're just a reporter, and then you're going to go into the opinion section, okay? And it's really best if you structure it that way. Sometimes students want to do summary opinion. Don't do that. It's just easier for me and the teaching assistants when we're grading if it's just structured the way I just explained it to, okay? Here's what I consumed, here's a summary, and then here's my opinion of those. I know it may feel a little wonky to you at first, but I promise you'll get used to it. So that's just an easier way to structure it. If you structure it a different way, we might be able to still grade it just fine. But when we're grading a lot of these, you know, in any given week, I could have like 200 of these. And it's just easier if you just structure it the way I've kind of told you. It's helpful for us. Also, make sure you read the rubric. Every class is a rubric. I'm pretty much going to use the same rubric most of the time, but again, there may be moments where your class is unique or specific, so make sure you read the rubric and make sure you know the word count for your class. Make sure you know the word count. If you go below the word count, we're going to penalize you significantly. If you go over the word count, so long as you have good substance, I probably won't penalize you a bunch. All right, maybe a tad bit, so long as it's good. Some students just don't know how to edit themselves. They just talk on and on and on. They just ramble, and they say something in 10 sentences. They could have been 3 sentences. And so they end up going over. So try to work hard to get it down in that frame, right? For some classes, my word count's 500 to 750. For other classes, it's 750 to 1,000 words. Whatever it may be, make sure you're in that. Again, if you go below, you're going to be significantly penalized. If you go over, so long as it's really good, if it's really good reflection, I won't penalize you much, if at all. If it's just kind of a mediocre reflection and you've just kind of gone on and on and on and on, and you've gone 200 words over, definitely going to penalize you a bit for going over there. So work really hard to edit yourself and get down in that reflection window. That would be very helpful to you, helpful to us as we're reading it and consuming it. So hopefully this is helpful to you. I'm now over 15 minutes. So this is longer than the first one I shot, but hopefully this is helpful. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you're one of my students, you're clearly going to have my email, my cell phone, Facebook Messenger, any of the above. You're welcome to reach out to me on all of those at any time. I look forward to being here, answering any questions, and serving you. Hopefully this video was helpful to you.